The jungle had taught Japanese soldiers one lesson above all others: smoke meant safety. Smoke revealed the enemy. Smoke exposed movement. Smoke warned of danger before it arrived. For years, Japanese troops relied on that rule to survive. If they saw smoke, they prepared. If they smelled fuel, they aimed their rifles. If they heard the roar of flame, they attacked the source immediately. And for a long time, it worked. American flamethrowers were terrifying weapons, but they were also predictable. The thick black smoke, the bright roaring flame. The long, obvious arc of fire that announced itself before it struck. Japanese troops learned to recognize the signs instantly. A flamethrower operator became a priority target. The moment smoke appeared, every rifle, machine gun, and grenade focused on the source. Flamethrower teams suffered some of the highest casualty rates of the Pacific War. The weapon cleared bunkers, but it also painted a target on the man carrying it. Then quietly, without announcement or official doctrine, something changed. One night, deep in the Pacific jungle, Japanese sentries waited in silence. The air was heavy, insects buzzed, leaves rustled faintly in the darkness. The Marines were close, the Japanese knew that much, but there was no smoke, no roar, no warning. Then the fire came. It did not arc through the air, it did not roar. It did not trail smoke, it appeared suddenly, silently, and impossibly close. A bunker entrance erupted in flame without warning. The interior ignited instantly. The men inside had no time to react, no time to scream, no time to flee. 1 second they were alive. The next, the bunker was a furnace. Nearby Japanese soldiers froze, staring into the darkness, trying to understand what had just happened. There was no smoke to track, no sound to locate, no trail to follow, only fire appearing from nowhere. Panic rippled through the position. Rifles fired blindly into the jungle. Grenades were thrown at shadows. Officers shouted orders that no one could follow because no one knew where the attack was coming from. The enemy was no longer visible, audible, or predictable. The Marines had done something unthinkable. They had created a flamethrower that left no smoke trail. For the Japanese, this was not just a new weapon. It was the destruction of a rule they depended on to survive. To understand why this broke Japanese defenses so completely, you have to understand how deeply smoke defined Pacific combat. Japanese bunkers were built to withstand artillery and grenades. Thick logs, reinforced earth, narrow firing slits, interlocking fields of fire. They were designed to be attacked head-on and survive. Flamethrowers were one of the few weapons that could reliably clear them, but only if the operator lived long enough to fire. Japanese doctrine treated flamethrowers like beacons. The moment smoke appeared, everyone knew what was coming. Machine gunners swept the area. Snipers targeted the operator. Mortar crews adjusted fire instantly. The flame never reached the bunker if the operator was killed first. So when smoke disappeared from the equation, everything collapsed. The flamethrower now arrived without warning. The first units to encounter it reported impossible stories. They claimed bunkers were igniting with no visible attacker. That flame was appearing from shadows without any sign of approach. That Marines were firing fire itself from invisibility. At first, commanders dismissed the reports as confusion or exaggeration, but then more units reported the same thing. Different islands, different nights, the same terrifying pattern, no smoke, no sound. Sudden fire. What the Japanese didn't know was that American Marines had grown just as frustrated as they had. Flamethrower teams were dying too quickly, too predictably, too often. Something had to change. The solution did not come from high command, it came from the field. A small group of Marine engineers and flamethrower operators began experimenting with fuel mixtures and pressure systems. Standard flamethrowers used thickened fuel that produced visible smoke when ignited. The smoke was unavoidable, or so everyone believed, but one mechanic noticed something subtle. At lower pressures with altered fuel ratios, the flame burned cleaner, hotter, faster, with far less smoke. The range decreased slightly, but the silence increased. The visibility dropped almost to zero. They had discovered a terrifying trade-off: less spectacle, more surprise. The Marines refined it quietly. No manuals, no formal approval, just field modifications shared from unit to unit. Operators learned to keep pressure low, bursts short, timing perfect. The weapon was no longer about long streams of fire. It was about sudden ignition at point-blank range, fire as an ambush. The first combat test shattered Japanese confidence instantly. A Japanese position guarding a narrow jungle approach had survived multiple artillery strikes. Grenades bounced off its reinforced entrances. Machine guns pinned down Marine infantry repeatedly. The position had become a nightmare. Then, during a night assault, a Marine crawled forward with the modified flamethrower. No smoke betrayed him. No roar gave him away. He moved silently through the brush, guided by touch more than sight. He reached the bunker entrance and fired a short burst. The interior ignited instantly. The Marines behind him advanced in disbelief. The bunker that had held them for days was silent within seconds. No warning, no drawn-out fight, just sudden total destruction. Word spread fast but quietly. By the time Japanese units began encountering the weapon regularly, it was already too late to adapt. One Japanese soldier described the experience in a diary recovered after the battle. There was no smoke. The fire simply appeared. It was like the night itself was burning. The psychological impact was devastating. Japanese soldiers depended on early warning. Smoke was one of their most reliable indicators. Remove it and the battlefield became incomprehensible. Every shadow could be fire. Every silence could hide death. Night, once their advantage, became their enemy. Flamethrower teams now operated like assassins. They moved with infantry screens. They waited. They listened. They struck suddenly and vanished again. Bunkers that once required hours to neutralize fell in seconds. The Japanese tried to adapt. They increased sentries, they fired flares, they swept the jungle with random fire. But without smoke there was nothing to aim at, nothing to track, nothing to warn them, and the worst part was the sound. There was almost none. The modified flamethrower produced a short, sharp ignition, more like a violent exhale than a roar. By the time Japanese soldiers realized what they were hearing, the fire had already done its work. One Marine described it simply: they never knew where it came from, they just knew it was too late. As the tactics spread, entire defensive networks began collapsing. Japanese bunkers were designed to support each other. One bunker covered another, fire lanes overlapped. If one position fell, the others were supposed to react, but reaction required awareness, and awareness was gone. Bunkers ignited without warning. Adjacent positions didn't know whether to fire, retreat, or hold. Some fired blindly and revealed themselves. Others froze, waiting for smoke that never came. Fear replaced discipline. On one island, Japanese defenders abandoned multiple intact bunkers after watching neighboring positions erupt in silent fire. They believed the Americans had developed a flamethrower that could strike from invisibility. Rumors spread that Marines could ignite bunkers remotely, that the jungle itself carried flame. None of it was true, but belief mattered more than truth. The weapon didn't just kill men, it destroyed confidence. Marine commanders noticed something remarkable. Resistance collapsed faster where the silent flamethrowers were used. Casualties dropped, advances accelerated. Positions that once required artillery now fell to infantry alone. The Japanese weren't just losing ground, they were losing the will to hold it. One captured Japanese officer later admitted, "We knew how to fight flamethrowers, but this was not a flamethrower we recognized." By the end of the campaign, Japanese soldiers had begun altering their behavior. Some fired at any sound. Others refused to man bunkers at night. Some abandoned positions entirely at the first sign of American approach. The silent flamethrower had done something no bomb or shell could do. It made the enemy afraid of silence itself, and that fear would only grow. The first reports sounded unreal even to seasoned Japanese officers. Flamethrowers without smoke did not exist. Every known model announced itself with a roaring flame, a thick white plume, and a trail that could be seen from hundreds of meters away. Smoke was the warning. Smoke was the signal to fire back. Smoke was the only chance defenders had to react. But this time there was no smoke. Japanese Marines who survived the initial encounters struggled to explain what they had seen. They described bursts of fire appearing suddenly inside bunkers that had not yet been engaged. They described flames that seemed to originate from the shadows themselves. Some insisted the Americans were using incendiary grenades thrown from impossible angles. Others claimed the fire came from underground. None of them mentioned smoke. American Marines, meanwhile, knew exactly what was happening. Standard flamethrowers in the Pacific had a deadly flaw. Their fuel mixture burned hot, but it also produced thick vapor clouds that betrayed the operator instantly. Japanese machine gunners learned to watch for that smoke. The moment it appeared, every rifle, grenade, and mortar focused on the source. Flamethrower operators had one of the shortest life expectancies on the battlefield, so American engineers changed the mixture. By adjusting fuel ratios, pressure settings, and ignition timing, they produced a flame that burned cleaner, faster, and with far less visible exhaust. At night or under jungle canopy, the flame appeared without warning. No plume, no advance signal, no time to react. To the enemy, it looked like spontaneous combustion. On one ridgeline, a Japanese bunker complex had survived days of artillery. Concrete and timber construction absorbed shell after shell. Infantry assaults stalled repeatedly. The defenders inside were confident. They had beaten back flamethrowers before. They knew the sound, they knew the smoke. Then fire entered the bunker without warning. No roar, no cloud, just sudden heat and light flooding the interior. The defenders panicked instantly. Men dropped weapons and ran deeper inside, colliding with each other in the dark. Some tried to flee out rear exits, only to run directly into Marine rifle fire. Others suffocated before realizing what was happening. When American troops entered the bunker afterward, they found no scorch marks outside. No blackened approach, no burned vegetation, only destruction inside. Word spread quickly. Japanese Marines began reporting invisible fire. Positions that should have held were being erased without visible assault. Defensive lines dissolved not from force but from confusion. Units pulled back preemptively, abandoning strongpoints simply because they no longer trusted their senses. In the jungle, smoke had always meant danger. Now danger came without it. At night, the psychological impact multiplied. Japanese night doctrine depended on observation. Shadows, silhouettes, movement, smoke, sound. Without those cues, training collapsed. Marines stared into darkness, unsure where the threat was coming from. A bunker might remain untouched for hours, then suddenly erupt in flame from a direction no one was watching. One Japanese soldier wrote in his diary that the fire appeared like a spirit, and another noted that the Americans have learned to burn without warning. American Marines exploited this ruthlessly. They advanced flamethrower teams slowly, carefully, often stopping within meters of Japanese positions without being detected. When the flame finally fired, the distance was so close that escape was impossible. The lack of smoke meant there was no early alarm. The first sign of attack was already too late. Japanese officers tried to counter it. They ordered preemptive fire at any suspected approach. They instructed troops to listen for movement rather than watch for smoke. They increased night sentries. None of it worked. The flamethrowers were quiet until the moment of ignition. Jungle noise masked footsteps. The first flame was the only warning, and it was also the end. In several sectors, Japanese units abandoned bunkers entirely, preferring shallow foxholes or retreat positions. The bunkers had become traps. Structures designed to protect now felt like coffins waiting to be sealed by invisible fire. American after-action reports noted something unusual. Resistance dropped sharply once the new flamethrowers were introduced. Not gradually, instantly. Entire defensive networks unraveled within hours of first contact. The weapon did not just kill, it erased confidence. One Marine officer later remarked that the flamethrower did not clear bunkers, it emptied them. Japanese defenders often fled at the first hint of an approach, convinced that unseen fire would follow them inside. By the time Japanese command understood what was happening, it was too late. The tactic spread across units. Modified flamethrowers appeared in more assaults. Each use reinforced the myth. Each bunker destroyed without smoke deepened the fear. To the Japanese defenders, it felt as though the Americans had found a way to remove the only warning sign fire ever gave. And once fire no longer announced itself, there was nothing left to prepare for. By the time Japanese commanders fully realized what they were facing, it was already too late to adapt. Reports from the front no longer made sense. Bunkers were being destroyed without warning. Entire tunnel networks went silent without the usual signs of flame assault. There were no smoke plumes to mark danger, no roaring jets of fire to signal an attack, no time to react. The flamethrower that left no smoke trail had turned fire into something unseen. Japanese defenders had been trained to respond to conventional flamethrowers with immediate counterfire. The moment smoke appeared, machine guns were supposed to open up. Grenades were thrown blindly toward the smoke source. Mortars were pre-aimed at likely approach paths. This doctrine had saved countless lives early in the war, but now there was nothing to aim at. Marines approached bunkers under full concealment. The jungle remained still. The air remained clear. Defenders waited for the familiar warning signs that never came. Then, suddenly, fire filled their positions from inside the firing slit itself. Some Japanese soldiers never realized they were under attack until the heat reached them. In one engagement, a Marine flamethrower team advanced within 20 yards of a reinforced bunker without being detected. The operator waited for the signal. No smoke betrayed his position. No noise alerted the defenders. When he fired, the flame burst entered the firing port directly, igniting ammunition and fuel inside. The bunker went silent in seconds. Nearby Japanese units believed the position had simply stopped responding. They assumed communications had failed. When runners were sent forward to investigate, they found the bunker intact from the outside but completely destroyed within. This created confusion far more dangerous than panic. Japanese commanders could not determine where the Americans were attacking from. Defensive fire was scattered. Counterattacks were mistimed. Units hesitated, unsure whether they were under threat or not. Every pause allowed Marines to move closer. The psychological effect was devastating. Fire was no longer loud. Fire was no longer visible. Fire no longer warned. It arrived silently. At night, the effect multiplied. Traditional flamethrowers at night created massive glowing clouds that silhouetted the operator. The smoke reflected moonlight. The flame revealed movement. Japanese night fighters had learned to exploit this. But the new flamethrowers produced almost nothing visible beyond the flame itself. When used carefully, even the fire was hard to see until it was already inside the target. Japanese soldiers began reporting attacks by invisible fire. Some described bunkers being ignited from nowhere. Others claimed the Americans had found a way to burn positions without approaching them. Fear spread faster than understanding. One captured Japanese soldier later said, "We were waiting to see them, they never appeared." Marines quickly learned to exploit this fear. They advanced more confidently. Flamethrower teams were integrated tightly with rifle squads. Operators were protected until the last moment, then stepped forward, fired, and vanished back into cover. The enemy never knew how many flamethrowers were present or where they were positioned. In some cases, Marines deliberately fired only brief bursts, igniting interiors without revealing the source. Japanese defenders, expecting sustained flame attacks, waited for follow-up assaults that never came. Instead, Marines moved on to the next position while the defenders burned in isolation. This shattered the defensive rhythm of Japanese lines. Bunker systems relied on coordination. One position covered another. Once one bunker fell, others were supposed to increase fire. But when bunkers were destroyed silently, neighboring units often did not realize they were alone until Marines were already upon them. Entire defensive sectors collapsed without major firefights. Japanese officers attempted to adapt. They ordered constant scanning of jungle approaches. They instructed soldiers to fire preemptively, but blind fire wasted ammunition and exhausted men. Without smoke or sound to guide them, their efforts were useless. Some units attempted to retreat deeper into tunnel systems. This only made the flamethrower more deadly. Fire followed airflow. Flames traveled down shafts and corridors. Heat consumed oxygen. Escape routes became death traps. In one tunnel complex, Marines fired a single controlled burst into a ventilation opening. The fire did not explode outward, it moved inward. Minutes later, smoke began seeping from distant exits as the underground network filled with lethal heat. The complex was abandoned without a fight. By this stage, Japanese morale had begun to crack. Veteran soldiers who had endured artillery, bombing, and frontal assaults admitted privately that this weapon terrified them more than anything else. Not because it was powerful, but because it was unseen. You could not prepare for it. You could not anticipate it. You could not see it coming. The jungle, once a place of concealment for Japanese forces, now concealed their enemy instead. American commanders took note. Reports emphasized how effective the smokeless flamethrower was at breaking resistance without prolonged engagements. Casualties among Marines dropped in sectors where the weapon was deployed. Advances accelerated. Objectives were taken faster than planned. The flamethrower that left no smoke trail had become a force multiplier. As the campaign progressed, Japanese units began abandoning bunkers at the first suspicion of flamethrower presence. Some positions were left unmanned. Others were sabotaged by their own crews who feared being trapped inside. This created gaps everywhere. Marine patrols reported entire lines deserted overnight. Defensive belts that intelligence expected to take days to breach were crossed in hours. Resistance melted away not under bombardment but under fear. In the end, the weapon did not win battles by destruction alone. It won them by denial. It denied warning. It denied reaction. It denied control. The Japanese defenders were not defeated because they lacked courage. They were defeated because the rules of combat they understood no longer applied. Fire had become invisible. And when fire can strike without announcing itself, even the strongest defenses collapse from within. Long after the fighting ended, Marine veterans spoke quietly about the weapon. They did not celebrate it, they did not glorify it, they simply acknowledged what it had done. It ended battles before they began, it spared lives on one side, it shattered resistance on the other. And in the jungles of the Pacific, where every shadow mattered, the flamethrower that left no smoke trail proved one final truth: the most terrifying weapons are not the loudest ones. They are the ones you never see coming.